Hello, beautiful people. I'm super excited. I'm elated. My mind is blown. I'm flabbergasted. I'm dumbfounded. And I don't know what to say. Guys, I'm super happy. I'm having a guest. You guys already know. And trust me, he's very important to me. Like, I've followed him for years now. And he actually inspired me into podcasting. For singers anyway. And I'm talking about no other person but Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson has been teaching voice, has been a vocal coach for over 10 years. And he has a podcast. I guess it started around that period, right?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, the podcast probably did begin about then, didn't it? And I do obviously recall names that come up in sort of in cyberspace, you know, like I remember seeing your name in cyberspace, like across the years. So it's actually really good for me to also catch up with you. It's really cool. And so, but 5 years before that, or maybe 6 years before that, I began vocal coaching in 2007, and then I qualified in 2008. So it's like 15 years now.
Wow, that's a lot of experience. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation, Chris. I want us to go straight into it. I'm so excited. I'm so hyped. Okay, I want us to talk on a topic I believe most musicians and artists can relate to, and that is experiencing plateaus in our musical journeys. So, have you had this experience? How did you move through it? Like, I can't wait to hear all about it.
Me, myself, yeah, sure. Plenty of times. And that was one of the reasons why I ended up training my own voice anyway. Is rather I didn't experience a plateau, but I experienced a major problem, right? So what that meant was actually is going from being a professional singer but with no training. So that kind of makes me a professional because I earn money. But it makes me a beginner because technically I didn't have a clue what I was doing or how I was singing. So just beginning voice training at that point meant actually that was a point of progress for me, because I obviously went from no training to training, right? That's gonna stimulate progress. But after a while in the way that I was training was, I guess, fairly narrow in the way that it worked, in the way that it viewed stuff. So inevitably there were points when I experienced plateaus. I'd be very excited about the progress. I would hit a plateau and I would spend a bit of time at a plateau on my own until I went searching for advice and input from different coaches, and so whenever they showed me something that I had never thought of doing before, that's when there were moments when progress was really stimulated again. Like within a week, suddenly I was moving again. But what it took in those times was for me to try something actually a little bit off the wall, a little bit strange, or something I thought that I shouldn't do was actually the thing that actually made me move forward. So those moments in my life, and I remember the performances straight afterwards. Like I remember having the input or the session on like a Thursday, and then on the Saturday performance, I was just like, wow, oh my goodness, my voice is just like all over the place. I'm all over the place in a good way, you know. So I have such fond memories of busting plateaus.
You know, Chris, it's really comforting to hear this from you. Like, sometimes we feel all alone. We feel like we're the only ones these things happen to. You're just stuck. You do not know how to proceed from this point. You know you've moved from a particular level, but right now, you do not know where forward is. You just know you are stuck. Yeah? So, what challenges do you see singers face at this stage in your life? What are the challenges they face at this point in time?
Yeah, one of the big challenges they face is identity. Now, this is what I think, because sometimes what we need to balance as vocal coaches is we're balancing the ability to put some kind of technique into someone's life so that they actually can go to every gig and at least be able to predict what's going to happen in that gig. You know, like I know how I use my voice. It's not a lottery. So that makes the performances a lot more consistent. So that's often the reason why those intermediate singers are coming in. They want consistency. And so what they're balancing with that is they might then begin a lot of voice training, and what that tends to do is balance them out, you know, sort of, which is in some way like a good thing. Balancing someone out means they can sort of avoid the break in the middle of their voice and go from low to high with less cracks or less problems. But there is a possibility of that balancing them out to the point where actually, you know, you lose some of your individuality or vocal identity, uniqueness. And certainly in the singers that I work with, which are usually like original artists and songwriters and people like that, they're not striving for perfection. In fact, what they really want to have is imperfection within the recordings. It's really the imperfection that sells their records and connects them to people emotionally. So I think a lot of intermediate singers are really, one of the challenges they're facing is in their relationship with the vocal coach and who they train with, is probably finding that lovely fine balance between technique but preserving identity and imperfection in some way.
So basically the challenges intermediate singers face when it comes to vocal training and moving past their plateau is balancing technique and their identity. For me, it was a positive stuff because I used to be the belty, shouty and husky kind of singer. It had become an identity that everybody knew me with. But when I ventured into vocal training, I had to do away with all that. So yeah, it kind of changed my identity, but it was for the better. But there are some people who are known with, of course, good qualities that people enjoy and people like, and they are actually scared of losing them, probably why they are not venturing into vocal training. So I believe one of the challenges is actually finding a vocal coach who is able to preserve your identity and instill in you proper technique.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly I think that my voice training, like my identity, it actually grew from voice training, but it didn't grow necessarily from the initial voice training I had. That balanced me out, which I really enjoyed. It meant I could sing a lot more songs with a lot less trouble. But I don't think what it gave me was a very good dynamic in my voice, or an ability to be soft and loud and all these things. It just gave me balance. So I was happy with that for a few years, and then I started to realize, my recordings are not very interesting, you know. So I was kind of thinking about that. So what I kind of did was actually a lot of the training that I did after that, and sort of my self-searching was to explore the extremes in my voice and do some of the more strange things, character and even learning how to, you know, we obviously get told not to shout when we're singing, but on the other hand, we don't want to lose our ability to actually to call loudly, like and I lost that ability in my training. It balanced me out so much. I couldn't shout across a room for, you know, to call my friends because it would hurt my voice. So I realized at that point, I was like, I've trained myself out of some things that are actually good for my identity, you know. So for me, like you, I think I gained identity the more I trained. But for artists who are already selling records or are already known for a certain thing, then we sort of get into balancing, trying to preserve them rather than alter them. So I'm really happy with the big change I went through, but yeah, somebody might not be.
I totally agree because I can relate to it. After some years of training up, I discovered I lost my ability to call as well, because formerly I was the shouty, the belty kind of singer, And now I'm trying to balance out. I'm trying to reach out without shouting, without yelling. And trust me, there are songs that demand such type of expression. So I would need to learn how to belt properly or call out properly. So I totally understand. And many singers are faced with this challenge also, where they venture into vocal training and so much balance is brought into their singing that they lose some certain qualities. I think it's proper for them to go back to learning, because that was exactly what I did. So, what advice would you give to singers who are stuck, obviously, and they do not know what technique to learn now? They're just, okay, what do I learn? What do I need to improve on? So, what is your advice for those kinds of singers?
Well, it's a great question, and like you all know, it happens all the time. So if if techniques or things that you're trying are just not working, then it's possible that, of course, those things, those exercises or techniques, are not relevant for what the problem is, what the thing is that is in your way. That's basically the simplest answer. And that's where you'd have to try, with the help of a coach, you'd have to try and have a better idea of what the problem is you're facing. Because if you can do that, then that means you'll be able to make better choices. And so that's what I do in a lot of my coaching, is I put a bit more time into assessing the singer, finding out more about their voice, searching in parts of their voice they might never have been to, so I can get a lot more information. And then we can go, okay, so instead of trying to throw mud at a wall and seeing what sticks, instead we can actually make a better decision as to go, okay, so it looks like, unusually, you're going to gain some benefits from whatever it might be. It might be breathing, it might be vocal training, it might even be just a posture change, who knows? But it's hard to assess yourself as a singer like that, because you don't know where to look.
Yeah.
Coaches do. So that's an obvious one. However, what singers find, even when they find a coach to help them, they often find that still nothing works, which is really common, right? I'm still in this plateau, and I don't know why I can't move forward. And that's often because the person's pattern, their singing pattern, their way of doing it, and this is often tied to their aesthetic desire, like how they sound in their own head, in their own voice, right? That can block changes, completely block it. So it's not necessarily that that person is consciously blocking anything that comes in, but we have an identity in our head. We like the way we sound and we're used to it, and it is essentially who we are. So that's going to be a priority in that person, and it doesn't let changes in very easily. So one way around that is basically to build self-awareness of how we do stuff. And a lot of singers are not quite used to looking inward. They just sing and it doesn't work, but they don't notice much about the nuances of how it feels in their body, how it feels in their mouth, how they're perceiving it and what they're thinking about when they first start singing, how they even take a breath before they start. Maybe they pull this in or push that out. Like, who knows which parts of the anatomy like are working in whatever way. But the more they know about that stuff and can be in a calm setting, to just, it's okay to just notice very small things that go in the body, then we've got an opportunity to kind of build a picture of how that person actually approaches singing. And then if we spot something, we can interrupt it. Now, one thing that I could tell you as an example of that is when I ask singers who are in a plateau, what are you thinking about when you sing? Like, what's the first thing you think when you sing? And if I hear this answer, I know we're in trouble. answer is if the only thing they're thinking about is getting the notes right, is staying in tune, I know we are screwed. Because nothing else will make it in. No technique will stick around long enough, because their conscious mind is completely full up with the fear of going out of tune, and that doesn't allow anybody to move forward ever. It just keeps them in this horrible place. So what we have to do with those singers is part of the instruction would be, hey, look, forget about the pitches. Like, if they come out a bit flat, who cares? What doesn't matter. What you need to do is to free up your conscious mind to other bits of information. Think about something else, apply something else, and just accept what is going to come out of your mouth. And if that's a little bit flat, it doesn't really matter, because we can work it in different ways. But what you often find is the singer stops thinking about whether they're in tune, realizes, well, they're still in tune, without having to think about it. And then they suddenly realize, oh, I've been managing my voice so closely for so long, and for no point. So that's one of the reasons why singers get in plateaus, is because what they're thinking about when they're singing is just not necessary. It's taking up too much room.
You're right, Chris. You're right. Singers come to you with a pre-notion. They already diagnose themselves, and they feel like they already know what is wrong with their singing. I think singers just present themselves as patients to doctors, that is the vocal coaches, and have the vocal coaches diagnose them, because they come to you with these notions and they are so sure, and they are all about trying to fix it. Imagine when a singer comes to you with, they just want to fix it. When they fix the flat notes, everything will be fine. So yeah, it's a huge hindrance. So how do we help them break out of this? I'm sure you've had a student or someone you've coached and helped them break through this plateau. So how do we help them break out of it?
Provided there isn't anything sort of wrong with health, because health always makes like the voice more difficult to function, right? So when things don't move forward, or they always experience the same problem, we sometimes have to think about our lifestyle. Like, you know, maybe their speaking voice is a bit rough too, and so they might be experiencing something like, you know, stomach acid problems or reflux problems. But
reflux.
Yeah, provided all that stuff is kind of, let's say that's not the case. I often find that singers, like, variety is so important for so many reasons, because it's literally the way the body learns. Now, that's counterintuitive, because when most people want to get good at a song, they sing the song a lot. But when somebody actually sings a great variety of songs, and in a variety of dynamics, with a variety of different register sounds, maybe some songs will be very falsetto, some will be more belty or more chest voice like, and some will be happy and warm, and some will be angry and bitey. Sometimes you train a rotation of exercises. So if you've done the same exercise for 12 months, I'd recommend just throwing it away for a bit. Like an exercise probably doesn't need to stay with you for that long. So variety is really important, and stories that come out. The reason why this sort of led me down that path was, it's very common, and actually there's a particular singer I can remember who was always singing blues and belty blues, right? And she was pretty damn good at it. Now, what she did was, there was this point where she had to sing a performance with her sister, and their performance was German classical music, right?
Oh my goodness.
Right. And I'm like, she said to me, hey, we're going to be working on like Bach for the next 8 weeks. And it was just a casual concert.
Wow.
You know, it's just like her sister and her singing at like a 60th birthday, like a family birthday. So it wasn't a pro performance or anything. But what we ended up doing was singing very differently for 6 or 8 weeks. And then she, what we did, we had a session after the performance. So she said, oh yes, the performance went okay. She was like, well, it's classical, so you know, it's not really my bag. But what she did say was, but I've been going back to my contemporary music and my blues, and I'm like, oh, so this is a lot easier. This is really easy.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, everything about it was great. So what that meant was not to be confused that classical singing makes contemporary singing better. It doesn't.
No.
But what she experienced was singing classically for like 8 weeks was just an opportunity for variety. It was just something different. And that is so important. When singers change teachers, they often think the teacher has the answer, because when they change teachers, they progress again. And that, again, that might not be true. That might just be because you've gone from...
He brought in a kind of variety.
Yeah, it's just variety, because then you might find actually after 6 weeks with that new teacher, you're back on the plateau again. because variety has done its job, and now you need more variety. Otherwise, progress doesn't happen. So that's what I think is with any technical problem, is to come away from it and come back to it, is to include variety. And I don't get my singers to sing classical, like I don't know any classical, but what we might do is we might use register sounds like head voice that would be used in classical, but we would use them more frequently in some vocal exercises, and maybe way above the range they would normally sing. That provides the same kind of variety without me having to sort of tell
to teach them classical.
Because they're just going to run a mile from me. They're going to run away. So, and I don't know any classical repertoire at all. So apart from Ness and so that's what I think is for me the name of the game. Variety. Yeah. In that particular case, there was nothing they did differently at all. Apart from take 6 or 8 weeks out to sing in essentially what is a different register, and with a different setup. So for that person, it was important for their whole body and their whole singing system to be able to move in different ways. And it's a bit like being a professional weightlifter. Like if you do bench press. If you do bench press a lot, yes, you do get good at pushing a heavy weight up. But over time, professional bench pressers will tell you that they have to do the opposite movement. They have to do pulling, lots and lots of pulling, because what pulling does to the shoulder is it keeps it in line, so that actually when a joint is working well and it's in line, it actually produces much more force. So bench pressers, you know, arguably do more pulling than they do pushing in the amount of volume. So that's like a real world example and a parallel in sport, where variety is the success, and it is counterintuitive to what you think you need to do. But one thing I've noticed for success stories of singers particularly is apart from having variety, is when they actually subscribe to a slightly greater goal than they have already. And so for example, I might work with quite a lot of songwriters who do a lot of singing in the studio, but singing in the studio is in some ways a little bit simpler, because you can stop and start. You can sing a bit, you can record it, you can chuck it away. But what they don't get is they don't get the ability to progress, because they don't do as much live singing, not enough live singing. So when I have those singers go, okay, I've booked myself a gig of my original music and it's going to be 1 hour of my original stuff, and I'm going to have to sing it in one take. This isn't the studio. They've experienced an incredible improvement and a plateau bust in their voice, because now that's the variety as well, is that they now have to train differently. They now have to rehearse differently. They now have to do different exercises. They have to work on stamina rather than being able to sing one line at a time. So it all kind of parallels to the variety, but what it probably comes down to is what stimulates somebody doing variety is that they have a change in their goal. So a lot of the success stories of my singers have been because they have altered their goals. They've put an extra challenge into their goal in some way, and that has led to variety. It's led to training differently.
So let's talk about vocal health, Chris. Africa is a very funny place. Trust me, you would not believe the horrible things we do to our voices. So let's talk vocal health. How do singers, or rather intermediate singers, go ahead to pursue after learning new techniques and still preserve good vocal health?
Through Plateaus much better.
Speaking of balance, Chris, when we do variety, I've had students come, and especially one, he was like, he was working on improving his head voice, getting a better, stronger head voice. And we began to do exercises. Then he came with complaints like, ever since he started doing his exercises, he discovered he began to lose his low notes. He began to lose notes in his chest voice. And I was like, it's normal for that to happen. And I explained. So what I'm trying to say now is, how do we put a balance? Okay, how do we know? Let's not move too far. Okay, let's know, okay, we are going upward to this direction. We are changing directions and going upward. But how do we know when to come back and say, let's work on this other part? Because leaving this other part feels like we're losing it.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and it is pretty common for people who would sing high, for example, and if they sing high all day, it's not unusual and certainly not a major issue if you would say lose one or two notes from your very lowest range. So, you know, for example, when I wake up in the morning, every day I usually sing down to E flat 2, right? And that's just kind of like how my baritone voice works. Now that is every day. If I'm ill, it's lower, right? But usually it's E flat 2. And by the end of the day, when I've been singing high repertoire, because I do sing quite a lot of high repertoire, and obviously I teach a lot of people throughout the day, generally my E flat 2 turns into F2 or F sharp 2. But it returns every single day at the bottom of my voice, right? So that's one of the ways to kind of monitor what's going on is if you wake up the same every day, then what you're just experiencing is how all the muscles are just shifting towards what you're doing across the course of the day, i.e. you're singing higher. But when you wake up in the morning, it's always the same bottom note every day. Then across a period of time, your voice is not actually depreciating. It's not fading out, and it's you're not going to experience long-term problems. So understanding your own range every day in the morning is actually a quite important measurement for you to understand, how if you're doing something too much. And you need to reconfigure. It's the same with the top notes as well. If you end up working a lot on your low notes, but then you start to lose 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 top notes, that's again another cause for you to change your behavior and include a variety again of bottom and top in both parts. Or in every day in your voice training. So that's what I think. But I think as well, when somebody goes to their upper voice, if they go to the upper voice or the head voice with some strain as well, they might again find it even harder to come down, because tension in the system, in the throat and in the tongue. Tension can really keep us in higher pitches. So what we want to be sure of is that when we're singing in any register, that we're optimizing it to the point where it's the lowest effort. It's never going to be no effort, but it's going to be the lowest sort of extraneous effort or the lowest unnecessary effort to achieve that sound. We just have to be sure that we're doing that. And one of the ways I do that is to make sure that I use exercises that are based on resonance, because resonance is, essentially the way that your voice is boosted by the shapes in your throat and your mouth. So when resonance is good, and we get that primarily through vowels, when resonance is good, then the amount of extra effort that's not necessary tends to fall away. And then each register that you're working on is usually stronger without you having to make any more effort, and they tie together much better in the break as well. You lose less notes on the bottom and top on your behavior. So that's what I tend to do, is just make sure that that's what I'm doing, is I'm supporting those new changes in a voice with resonance strategies, basically.
You see, Chris, I tell singers every time that you are like a planet that has not been explored, and you need to take out time to explore yourself as a singer. You should be able to tell what are the kind of things that happen when I sing in a particular kind of way. This singing journey it's all about self-exploration, self-awareness. Okay, what happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? It would really help out. And trust me, that is how you find out your unique self, because you know what happens with you when you sing in a kind of way, how your voice sounds when you do some kind of things. So take out time, singers, take out time. Moving to the next question. For intermediate singers who are hoping to break through plateaus and move forward, what are the qualities you're supposed to look at when choosing a vocal coach?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And to kind of go off on a tangent a bit, because and this kind of makes the point as to what we should look for in a coach. And I'm talking myself from the point of view of like singing like contemporary music. Like, I'm not talking about classical at all. I'm talking about pop music, popular styles, right? But a lot of the greatest artists in history didn't have a coach for a long time, until they, long after they formed their vocal identity and their styles, right? They didn't have a coach. And I think that was a great thing that they didn't have a teacher. I really do. And I'm not trying to put us all out of business, Victor. That's not my purpose here. But I think it's important for artists and singers to have a lot of autonomy in how they do things. It's up to them to kind of take risks. And I don't mean risks as in risking their voice health, but taking risks in terms of the experimentation of even sounds that you think would be so weird that you would never use that sound, but you do it anyway, just to see what's there. What does that sound do? What is it? And it becomes experimental. And everybody, all the greatest artists in history have had the opportunity to find something truly amazing on their own with no input, right? Which is, I think, is important. So what point that makes is that we spoke about this earlier, is that the coaching can have the opposite effect on singers. We might think that coaching would improve singers, and it does. It really, really does. But the wrong kind of coaching for that singer would balance them out too much, like we spoke about earlier, right? Too much technique and not enough expression. So what I think singers in pop music should be looking for is to try and find a teacher that is allowing them to explore, that is giving them things to do that feel explorational, that feel experimental. So there's some structure. There's a little bit of like warming up, which is structured. And there's a bit of like, okay, so if you've got a particular problem, we'll do a particular exercise for that. That is structure, right? But then what we should be doing with a coach is going, okay, where's the playtime? When can we get rid of all structure and just give them a vocal playground to go in and go, okay, I'm going to give you some very basic instructions. I'm going to give you these weird character voices to do. And we're going to explore how we can put that into songs. And that might be like, you know, you might sing a sad song happy. You might sing a happy song sad.
Sad.
You know, what you're doing is you're doing the opposite thing to what you think you should do. But within that, you find incredible things when you come out of structure or you come out of expectation and you go into play, you go into breaking rules. And so that's my top tip, is that if ever the lessons feel incredibly structured, yes, that I think that might be cool for somebody who's in classical, because classical singers, they have to fit with an aesthetic.
You have a lot of rules. Yeah,
you have a lot of rules and stylistic rules. It's not like you can just sing in any color on the top.
No.
No, you're right. It's like, but in pop, in popular styles, the rules are out of the window. There is no rules. So if there are too many rules in a voice lesson, then it's already not fitting with the environment of popular styles. So what we have to do is, we have to look for a coach who's willing to allow you to experiment and find something, but be really good at providing you with the tools to be unstructured, to discover things. And so we don't just let people just go off and do anything. We give them we almost give them a set of like very loose instructions and then say, tell me what you find out from that in 1 week. Like, I don't mind however you mix that up, just mix it up. But so you give them the tiniest bit of structure so they're not just kind of flailing around, not knowing what to do. But really there's no specific outcome to your exercise. It's really about what they end up discovering. The red flags in exploration, I think, are the things that allow you to explore with the least amount of impact on your voice, right? And there's a couple of things there. One thing would be hydration. So hydration and a lack of it puts more effort into your singing system. So almost every person who's been researched on hydration and reduced hydration, and then they tell you how it is to sing, everybody says, oh, it feels so much more effort. And the effect on the vocal cords is the chances of injury are quite a bit higher when you're sort of generally dehydrated. So it's needless to say that drinking water obviously helps that, and drinking water steadily throughout the day. Some people carry around 5 liters of water with them. That's just way too much. And some people are obsessed with hydration. But what I think is important is just kind of, most singers tend to sort of benefit between 1.5 and 2.5 liters of water a day. But whatever amount of water you drink, the way that you breathe matters a lot to your hydration. And so a lot of, I think certainly in the UK, we're quite prone to things like snoring and breathing through our mouth a lot all day.
Through the mouth.
Yes, which, you could drink 5 liters of water per day if you wanted to, but it isn't going to make much difference if you're breathing through your mouth all day, because your body will be hydrated, but your vocal folds will be dry. Yes. So I think really hydration and how your body manages hydration through nasal breathing is actually a really good way and a good tip for anybody who often feels like their voice is dry, because that is a red flag for trying to do things like belting. Yeah, I wouldn't belt if my voice felt dry. I wouldn't try it. I wouldn't go to my highest note if my voice felt dry, or my highest song. So that's one of the red flags. Vocal load is another. So if your voice feels like it, the tone of it changes, or it feels tired, they're two red flags. And the reason why I say if your voice tone feels like it changes throughout the day, then because some people don't really perceive like tiredness, they're not on that level of awareness to notice that their voice feels tired, but they do notice that it sounds a bit more airy as they get throughout the day, slightly rougher. And what that usually points towards is that the amount of voice use in that day is getting quite high. And if voice use is high, then singing is obviously extra voice use. So we're kind of loading on top of load. And many jobs are vocal jobs, like intermediate singers. They might be great singers and they might be getting paid on the weekend for it, but they might still be in a day job 9 to 5 in the week. So thinking about your job as if it's in customer service or hospitality, in sales, maybe you're an instructor or a teacher of some kind, or you just have to communicate a lot in your job. And then you might have a social life where you're very social and you love talking to people and friends. Then some of the red flags are the feeling of tiredness and the change of tone throughout those days. So as much as you might really want to sing that expressive song at the end of a busy day at work, I'd say wait for a less busy day at work, so that you don't overload your voice with that. So I think that's quite important to understand what we're exposing our voices to every day, and try and not put too much on. Yeah.
Chris has said a lot. Guys, you have to be watchful. There's a whole lot of self-awareness when it comes to singing and vocal training. You have to look inwardly always. You have to be able to say what exactly is going on when you sing in a kind of way. Our time is fast spent. Thank you so much, Chris. Talking to you has been eye-opening and refreshing. I'm going to sleep on this. Yeah, I'm going to sleep on this. It's a huge one. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming.
Yeah, thanks. This has been really fun to catch up, really fun to chat. The Naked Vocalist is something that a podcast that anybody can get on Spotify. We are adding new episodes. We added a new episode kind of recently, so we'll be adding new episodes to that. But there's already like nearly 60 there, I think. Yeah. So there's plenty. If you've never heard of us, there's plenty to get through if you'd like to listen. And I also my coaching is here in the UK, but I teach internationally online. But one of the big things that I'm doing right now is I've created a teacher training platform and program called Teach Voice. The amazing job and very privileged job of helping teachers to upskill and to learn more and to feel supported, and also connect with a really nice, relevant bunch of people where your own progress can improve. So yeah, from the podcast to my teaching to my what takes up my time right now, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that.
That was Breaking Through Plateaus with Chris Johnson. Join us next time for another insightful and educative episode. Don't forget to follow on Spotify and on every other listening platform, and also make sure you share this episode with as many people as you can. Until next time, this is Making Musical Quantum Leaps.